Hey everybody, welcome back to another JBoz gaming video. This is your host JBoz, and in this video we're going to talk about capping, capturing the base of the enemy, and talking about our base that can be captured. And that's what I mean by capping. So let's get into this. Hopefully this won't be too long of a video, but the first thing that I want to say about capturing the base is there's different scenarios you have within World of Tanks. The first is called a standard battle, and that's where each team has a base, a circle somewhere on the map that the enemy can capture by placing tanks in it and running a timer out. Um, that can happen for either team. Then there is what's called an encounter battle. The encounter battle is there's a base in the middle of the map somewhere, or on the map somewhere. Usually it's in the center somewhere. That either team can put tanks on and drain the timer and capture the base. If they do, in either scenario, they win the game. Couple of differences. Standard battle, in order to, if an enemy is capturing your base, you must do damage to them in order to keep them from capturing your base. In an encounter battle, you don't have to do any damage to them, though you can. They'll lose capture points when you do damage to them, but you can pull onto the cap. Your team can pull onto the cap, which stops all cap reduction. Period. So in encounter battle, it works a little bit different than in a standard battle. So let's deal with the first scenario around the standard battle. The standard battle is if you go and cap the enemy's base, you start a timer once you pull onto that cap. You're accumulating cap points. The first person that pulls on is the person that starts to accumulate the cap points first. The person that's been on there the longest will have accumulated the most cap points. Only the first 3 people on the cap can accumulate cap points. So it is not useful or helpful for more than 3 people to capture the base. I've seen this, and you probably have too, where there's 5 or 6 people on the cap, and it does absolutely no good. The timer will not move faster. The only thing that will happen is you can maybe prevent the enemy team from coming back and hitting the particular tanks that matter, the first 3, because they won't know which tanks those are, and maybe they'll shoot somebody else that doesn't matter. That's fine, but just know that you're not accumulating cap points because you were the 4th or beyond person to get on the cap. So, in order to, the other thing that I want to note is when you the first tank that pulls onto the cap, an audible bell goes off. It's an alarm in the game for the other side to know that their base is being captured. So it's one way to announce roughly where you are on the battlefield is when you drive on that cap circle. So the enemy's going to know, right? He's going to know no matter where he is on the map, whether he can see you or not, he's going to know his base is being captured because the game is going to tell him that, or her. And so just know that that happens, and you are basically announcing that you are at his cap, and she or he is going to come back and try to uncap you by shooting you. Now, how do we uncap? So when we go back to our cap that an enemy is trying to capture, and we shoot them, we actually pin a shot. We can't just ricochet a bullet. That doesn't count. It has to actually pin. You have to do damage. And as soon as you do damage to that tank, then that tank loses all captured points. So if tank A, B, and C, 3 tanks, capture the base, A's the first one on, B's the second one on, and C's the third one on, and say the third one just got on, and I've pulled back, and I shoot C, I shoot the third one on, then, even though I pin him, and the timer doesn't reset very much, or maybe not at all, depending on that if he's accumulated any cap points at all, because he's not the primary capturer of the base yet. And so even though he will start accumulating points, I can't reset the cap. I can't increase the timer without doing damage to all 3 tanks, especially the one that's accumulated the most cap points, which is A. I don't know which tank A is, but I need to be able to shoot as many tanks on the cap as I possibly can when I go back to uncap someone, so that I am trying to ensure that the timer will reset or the timer will increase so that we have more time to get them off of our base. And so the reason I point this out is this is a situation where you do potentially want to use high explosive shells, so that it doesn't matter whether you pin or not, you actually do damage to the tank. With HE rounds, you can actually do damage without pinning them, and that will reset the cap the cap points that they've accumulated, and potentially reset the clock. Most times it's 3 minutes, and it reduces for each person that's on the cap up to 3. So usually the first person on cuts it in half, so it goes from 3 minutes to a minute and a half. Now this is different for encounter battles, but standard battle 3 minutes, minute and a half for the first one, and then I think it's 90 seconds or so for the second one on, and then the third one, it usually takes it down to 45 seconds. Now, if there's already people on it and they've accumulated some cap points, the timer's already ran down, so the third person might even reduce it lower. But it's always a good idea to try to get 3 people on the cap if you really are trying to capture the base. And it is also important to note that most times when you go back, you need to shoot as many enemies on the cap as you can, hopefully hitting the person that has accumulated the most cap points to reset the clock as much as possible for your allies. All right, so that's standard battle. The encounter battle is a little bit different. Usually the timer is longer, and it does require, both teams can be on the cap. If both teams actually enter the cap circle, the timer stops. So no one team can capture the cap without them having sole control of the cap. And so that's why it's important to understand the difference between an encounter battle and a standard battle, because the cap works differently in an encounter battle. In an encounter battle, usually the timer is longer. And so I know people do this, and it's their strategy, and I get it. You can play however you want, but in general, I do not go to the cap right away in an encounter battle. All that does is announce where you are on the map. You want to try to get numbers on the enemy before you try to cap out the encounter battle cap circle. Once you have numbers on the enemy, then you can try to cap it out. Or let's say you're losing the game and this is your last hope at trying to win the game, you might try to cap out the cap circle. That's if they have a lot of slow, heavy tanks and they're way away or pretty far away from the encounter cap circle. Now, in general, that's going to be hard because an encounter battle, generally the cap is in the middle of the map. So it's not like a situation in a standard map or standard battle where the cap circle is on the opposite end of the map, where maybe they had heavies that drove down to your cap, didn't cap, but you're now capping on their cap, and those heavies got to traverse the whole map, right? So it's a little bit harder to do that in an encounter battle because most times they only have to travel half the map. And most tanks can make it that far within a reasonable amount of time, 30 to 90 seconds, right? So that's something you need to be aware of as far as standard battles and encounter maps. The other thing that I want to say about capping is, even in a standard battle, if you have a significant tank advantage, let's say your team's up 7-1, and you maybe don't have an opportunity, or you don't know where the enemy is, it's okay to go onto the cap and start to cap. Maybe that will draw the enemy out. But what I wouldn't do, as common courtesy etiquette in the game, if you will, is I would not cap it out. I wouldn't let the timer run out. Only if you have that advantage below 5 tanks would I ever really consider capping the game. You get more experience by doing damage in a match than you ever do in capping the game out. So all you're doing is really hurting your team and yourself when you cap a game and you have such a decisive lead like that. I see it quite often, especially in lower tiers, where people think, they want to win the game. And don't get me wrong, winning should be your first priority. But you clearly are going to win the game if you're up by 5 tanks or more. Not that people can't come back, because I have certainly come back where I've killed 5, 6, 7 tanks in a match, all by myself. But in general, you will start to see that happen with each tank that drops, right? Then you can go to the cap, right? Or stay around the cap. You don't have to go chase the tank down. You don't have to isolate yourselves. You can play smart, still hold that decisive advantage, still do the damage you can potentially and kill that last tank, kill all the enemy if you can, and not have to cap out. So be smart about it. Don't always just cap if you've driven all the way to the other end of the map. I know, heavies, it takes you all that time to get there, so what else are you going to do? Well, it's okay, again, to get on the cap and start that timer. Just don't prepare yourself if you have a lead to pull off the cap. And I've even done this before where I'll pull on the cap, I'll run the timer down to 10 seconds or so, and we still have such a decisive lead. I'll pull off the cap to give my allies more time to kill that enemy. And if they don't kill him within the next few seconds, then I might pull back on, get that timer low again, and then pull back off and give them more time. Depending on how many people are trying to cap, I control the cap and I control the hourglass, so to speak, of the time running out at that point. So I'm gonna keep pressure on the enemy that we will win this game if you don't come out from hiding, because sometimes they go on hide. Or I give my teammates that opportunity to get that extra damage, to get that extra kill, to finish off the game by killing all the enemy. And that's what you should try to do when you have such a decisive advantage. And again, that advantage is if you have +5 tanks, you have a decisive advantage in the match at that point, especially late in the game. So capping that quickly, or capping at that point, is really hurting your team and yourself. So try to not do that. Now, if you're convinced you aren't going to win the game for whatever reason, and you think, hey, this guy is pretty good, he's got a lot of kills, I just don't want to risk losing the game. It's okay to go ahead and take the win and cap out. But I would really consider getting off the cap in those late games where you have such a tank advantage. Again, 5 or more tanks, you should not be capping. And some people even get off the cap when there's only 3 tank advantage. Now that's a little closer than most people realize. Just because you have 3 tank advantage doesn't mean that those tanks have hit points and so on. But for the most part, that's my general rule of thumb. For myself, is I don't get on the cap when we have a +5 tank advantage, or when I do get on the cap, I plan on getting off. I'm just putting pressure on the other team. I'm not going to actually hold the cap. All right, so that's what I wanted to say about caps and cap circles and being able to capture an enemy's base. If I've missed something, or that you would like to see covered in this video or a future one, please leave a comment. I appreciate the feedback. If this has been helpful, hit that like button. If you like the content we're doing here, please hit the subscribe. And of course, hit the bell if you'd like to get notified of any new uploads. Good luck on the battlefield. We'll see you in the next one.